Dave Weaver will be talking each and every game, morning games, afternoon games, the late game, the Monday night game. You're going to catch it all right here. What about that AFC South showdown between Tennessee and Houston? An absolutely huge game to see who stays atop this division. Can Ryan Tannehill stay hot? And can the Titans beat Houston? They are a 2.5-point home favorite. We'll talk about that game. Oh, and what about that NFC matchup? The Red Hot Rams, that's right, they're not dead yet. They are still fighting for a playoff spot. And the Cowboys, despite their losing record, still have a chance to win their division. We'll be talking about the Rams-Cowboys matchup. And what about that AFC wildcard spot? Actually, the two teams right now that are currently in the wild card positions, the Bills and the Steelers, will be matching off. And can James Conner make an impact in his return? He's expected to come back from that injury and play tonight as the Steelers host the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo at about a 1.5-point road dog at the moment. We'll keep you updated on all the lines. But first, let's introduce the guy that will be joining me on today's program, and that is the king of analytics, Edward Egros, all the way from Dallas, Texas. Hey, Ed.
Hey, how's it going? I didn't know I was royalty now. This is terrific. Do I get extra perks for that?
Where's your crown? It's somewhere behind you there next to your bobbleheads, I'm sure. Yeah, we'll be talking to Ed. He's going to give us some good insight into these games, as we'll be talking about 15 different ones, everything but the game that already happened this week where the Ravens ended up beating the Jets by 21. So that means we have one favorite that is already covered on the week. Is it going to be a day of favorites, Ed, or is it going to be a day of underdogs? Let's start with the Titans. I said it was a 2.5-point line. It has now moved to 3, so a full field goal. The home favorite, Titans, total 50.5. That's a big number, but boy, this offense has really been rolling with Ryan Tannehill over the last 4 weeks. Since Tannehill's taken over, they've been the number 2 offense, but over the last 4 weeks, they are the number 1 offense in the NFL, 150 points in just 4 games. What can Houston do about slowing down Tennessee today, Ed?
I'm not sure that's even possible. I mean, Houston's defense really hasn't been able to slow down very much in general. And I expect another elite performance by Ryan Tannehill. And you mentioned the numbers. Let's look at a couple more in terms of passing success rate. Prior to when Ryan Tannehill took over, the passing success rate for Tennessee was at 35%. That was 31st out of 32 teams in the NFL. But since Week 7, since Ryan Tannehill became the starter, the passing success rate is 52%. That's third best in the NFL. And also in that time frame, Derrick Henry has been unbelievable, and he has helped free things up for this passing attack. He's been just a basic bowling ball in terms of running north and south. Defenses haven't been able to stop him. They haven't been able to contain too many of the Tennessee weapons, and I think the Titans cover this, and perhaps easily.
And Houston, of course, they had that big game a couple of weeks back against the Patriots, and they knew that they had this game atop the division this week. So last week, do you think that was just kind of a situation where they overlooked the Denver Broncos coming into town? They looked so sluggish. They gave up 31 points in the first half alone. I can't imagine that we're going to see that lackluster, and even the offense had, I think, 3 points at halftime, 31-3. I don't think we're going to see that lackluster offense today from Houston. So my feeling is, yes, Tennessee's going to score, but Houston's going to score as well. Let's talk the total real quick, 50.5. I mean, it's hard to play the under right now with the offense that these two teams present.
I completely agree with you. I think part of the problem last week was Drew Lock is such a dynamic thrower of the football that I'm not sure Houston was prepared for something like that. And then Deshaun Watson had some uncharacteristic mistakes. I mean, you think about it, 10 of his 13 games this season, we saw his total QBR above 50. So he's almost always above average in terms of overall performances. Tannehill, number 1 in completion percentage over expected plus EPA per play. I think both quarterbacks are going to play well in a game like this. It's just that Houston's defense has been so lackluster that I believe Tannehill will be able to exploit it. Derrick Henry will be able to exploit it. And so I'm with you. If there's a real play in this game, the one I'm most comfortable with, it's definitely the over.
Well, let's go from a game that is going to be high scoring, we think, to one that may be very low scoring, and that is Lambeau Field, the frozen tundra. The Bears taking on the Packers. It is going to be cold. We're going to see some hard hits. The Bears defense is certainly going to be trying to get to Aaron Rodgers like they did in the Week 1 matchup where Rodgers was sacked 5 times. So Week 1, Packers beat the Bears 10-3 in Chicago, but the Bears really didn't have an identity as far as their running game. Mike Davis was their starting running back in game number 1. He's no longer even on the roster. David Montgomery clearly has come around. He had some carries in that game too, but he didn't start. He'll be starting here. He'll be running effectively, I think, against the Packers. I like the Bears in this spot. And I think maybe we're going to have another 10-3, 7-6, 13-10. I can't see this being a ton of points being put up on the board between two very good defenses. I like Bears and under, and 3.5. It's been 4 most of the week, now down to 3.5. I've seen 4.5 at one point, which would be a nice number if you're going to tease it up to 10.5. It's kind of a tricky number if you're teasing at 3.5 to 9.5. So I would bet the Bears, maybe even sniff out a little bit of that money line at plus 176. Are you on my team here, or are you going to go with Aaron Rodgers and the Packers?
I don't think I've been on Aaron Rodgers' bandwagon at all this season, and this is going to be no different. I definitely like Chicago in this spot. Maybe not necessarily as an outright winner, but I think that book makes me a good bit more comfortable. One of the things that is important when diagnosing the Chicago defense is, yes, they do not have the takeaways like they did a season ago, which really made them an elite defense, the best in the National Football League. But it's not like that this defense all of a sudden got bad. They're still fundamentally sound. Some questions about what they're like without Roquan Smith. I think that's a significant setback, the linebacker there. But I think it's still a very talented defense, especially in the secondary. Eddie Jackson, I believe, one of the better quarterbacks around in terms of coverage. So I look at that entire unit and I go, yeah, there's a reason why they were able to contain Aaron Rodgers in the first meeting. I think they can do it again. I expect a really close game, and I think Chicago can cover 3.5.
And they're hot right now. They have gotten on a little bit of a winning streak. And last year, remember, in the month of December, Mitch Trubisky and the Bears didn't lose a game, and they're on pace to do that again as they are coming off that win in the first week of December last week. So we'll see if the Bears can sneak out a victory in Green Bay. Let's head to Washington, where the Eagles are coming into town, and they have looked lackluster, to say the least. They were able to muster up a win, and a very important one, after falling way behind against the Giants last week. They seem to be overpriced to me. They keep being, a 13, 10-point favorite, now even a 6.5-point favorite, and I don't trust them laying a lot of points, and I'm going to take Washington in this spot.
I'm going to take the Eagles here, and I think that's in large part because of Zach Ertz. I think he is such a reliable target for Carson Wentz. And also, too, when you look at Carson's overall numbers, yeah, they've been below average, no doubt about it. But when you have a safety valve like Zach Ertz, and when you're able to run 2 tight end personnel as effectively as they are, then I think you're still able to move the ball down the field. And I just have so many questions about this Washington offense. They don't have a reliable playmaker like Zach Ertz. Darius Geis isn't playing, and so the running game is not going to be there. They're not comfortable passing the football in general. So I'm just not sure what Washington's going to be able to do to at least get to like 17 points, 20 points. I do believe the Eagles can get to that at least. And so it's one of those deals where definitely the under makes the most sense to me, which means, given the narrative of the under, that I think the Eagles can cover the spread, but not by very much. Maybe touchdown, 8-9 points, something like that.
I mean, aside from Ertz, the rest of their skill position players are essentially practice squad guys. A lot of the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've seen them, playing starters that really aren't used to getting the ball. I don't know. I mean, if Ertz gets 2 or 3 touchdowns and carries his team on his back, more power to him. But I don't think, with the injuries that the Eagles offense has been going through, I just can't lay the 6.5. And I guess Terry McLaurin would be the one guy that you're relying on if you're betting the Redskins to maybe get a touchdown or 2. Maybe it's the under the play in this game then, if we're questioning the offenses.
I completely agree. And like I said, Eagles run a lot of 2 tight end personnel, Dallas Goedert, Zach Ertz, and you're just not going to score many points that way. You may still be effective moving the ball down the field, but it's going to be slow, it's going to be methodical, it's going to limit possessions both for yourself and your opponent. And so do I trust Washington to be an efficient offense with few possessions? Absolutely not. So I think the under makes the most sense in this game.
All right, let's go to MetLife, where the Giants will be hosting the Miami Dolphins, who just played there last week. They lost a heartbreaker on a last-second field goal against the New York Jets. Now they're going to try to pick up their 4th win of the season against the struggling Giants. 9 losses in a row for New York. Ed, how can the Giants, who's lost 9 in a row, be favored in this game by a field goal? I mean, I guess any team, a home team, it's tough to see a home dog against the Dolphins, but I like Miami in this game. I mean, the Giants are just spiraling.
I think I remember last week a lot of people saying Eli Manning is going to have one last hoorah and that he's going to go out in a blaze of glory. And that was the narrative that we all wanted to believe. And I understand wanting to believe that because who doesn't like Eli Manning? But this is not going to be the situation for that. I also like Miami in this game. Quarterback is playing far advantage. Yeah, he's more volatile, Ryan Fitzpatrick is, but he's capable of exploiting a Giants pass defense that has been absolutely brutal all season long. And Miami may have figured out its run game. And so while the Giants do a lot with Saquon Barkley, I think Miami is more willing to be dynamic, do a lot of different things. Yes, the weather may be a factor in a game like this. It may be very windy, and so this may be a ground and pound kind of game. But I do think that the Dolphins are a lot more willing to resort to the pass game and open things up than I think the Giants are with Eli Manning. And so I think the Dolphins win this game outright. I love the money line.
I'm with you. I think they are ripe for a small upset here. And if you happen to be going to that game, bundle up. It's supposed to be cold. It is supposed to be windy. But, hey, if you want to hop into one of the shuttles and run on over to the FanDuel Sportsbook at the Meadowlands, you can go there back and forth between MetLife and the FanDuel Sportsbook, make a wager, or maybe you don't even have tickets to the game. You can watch the entire thing and stay all day and night, as a matter of fact, at the FanDuel Sportsbook. You can wager on all of the NFL games and other sports that are going on. You can make some future wagers if you want to play the College Football Championship. Those odds are also available. But check it out if you are in town anywhere near New Jersey or New York. Make your first trip over to the FanDuel Sportsbook. And I am lucky enough to next week broadcast from the FanDuel Sportsbook. I will be doing more ways to win right there. And just because the Steelers are in town playing the Jets, I'm going to go to that game as well. So if you're out at the FanDuel Sportsbook next week, come over, say hello, and make some wagers. Great spot to watch the games and maybe bet some races at night, too, if you stick around for the Meadowlands card. I'll be there all next week and very much looking forward to it. And again, if you're out in the cold weather, always nice and warm inside the FanDuel Sportsbook. All right, let's go to Carolina. Ed's nice and warm in his office in Dallas. I'm not exactly sure of the weather conditions in Carolina, but I do know one thing. Offensively speaking, with McCaffrey and Samuel and Moore, I mean, these guys can hang and put up points to match what Russell Wilson and company is going to be doing for the Seahawks. I like the home underdog in this one, getting the 5.5 points. Seattle seems to always find a way to win some close ones, which is fine. If they win by 3, we're still covering if we are on the same page here with the Panthers. Are the Seattle Seahawks getting a little bit too much respect here, Ed, to be favored by 5.5 on the road?
I completely agree with you. We have a West Coast team flying to the East Coast for a 1 o'clock kickoff. I don't know if we cue a siren for something like that. But it should be going off because, the West Coast, East Coast thing for a home dog, I don't know. Russell Wilson, he's a lead outside the pocket, and he's a lead under pressure, no doubt about it. But these are also volatile statistics. So even though Russell Wilson is an elite quarterback and should be in the MVP conversation, you cannot rely on him to be that great and bail out your offense time after time after time. At some point, it's just not going to work out. Carolina ranks 13th in pass defense success rate. They're slightly above average in quarterback pressures. And given that Wilson may be dipping just a little bit and that there may be some regression to the mean as far as his play outside the pocket and under pressure, I would not be surprised if Carolina covers here.
Well, last week was certainly the beginning of that regression as he came back to earth and was unable to beat the Rams. We'll see if he bounces back with a victory at Carolina. All right, we are moving on to Kansas City, where they are going to be hosting the Denver Broncos, expecting 4 to 6 inches of snow today at Arrowhead. This is going to be a cold, white environment with plenty of snow dropping onto that green grass at Arrowhead. But, hey, the Denver Broncos are capable of playing in snow, so I don't think the weather is going to affect their performance. This is a big line between divisional opponents here, 9.5. Let's see if it actually got any higher than that. Yeah, it opened up at 10, and it's been basically dipping between 9.5 and 10 throughout the week, currently at 9.5. Patrick Mahomes versus Drew Lock. I mean, that's obviously a quarterback mismatch, you would think, although Drew's undefeated in his first 2 NFL games, probably wanting to emulate what Mahomes did in his first season out there on the field. But what do you think? Is that line too big, or are you going to go ahead and think that the Chiefs cover?
I think the Chiefs cover here. And granted, I love Drew Lock. I think he's going to be a great quarterback in the national. He's him in. His average depth of target was just 7 yards per throw. I mean, that's really, really short. Broncos easing him in. They are still winning games, and so clearly they know what they're doing. But Locke is taking on a Chiefs offense that really is starting to click at this point. I trust Pat Mahomes in this situation, and I think they're just going to outscore the Broncos, despite all of the heavy snow that should stick. They may be going to the ground game a good bit more, both offenses, but they can still run the football in Kansas City, no doubt about it. And Pat Mahomes might take off a couple of times himself. I know there are some injury concerns there, but you trust a quarterback to be able to protect himself. And so, yeah, I think Pat Mahomes covers here.
And maybe the snow affecting the total here just a little bit. Was at 46.5 a few days ago, dropped to 45.5, and now is at 44.5. Let's talk about a team that is desperate for a win, and that being the New England Patriots. They are playing the Cincinnati Bengals on the road and are getting plenty of respect here. A 10.5-point favorite. I think there are some out there saying that, I'm willing to lay that 10.5 because Bill Belichick, just wants to just go in there and destroy Cincinnati and get this easy win. But nothing's been easy lately for the Patriots. Is there a chance that they continue to struggle offensively and somehow Cincinnati can surprise them at home?
So let's first look at this Patriots-Chiefs game from last week. The dirty secret about Kansas City's pass defense is that it's actually not that bad. It's 12th in football in success rate. The problem is a lot of opposing offenses are either going deep down the field or they're sort of catching breaks here and there. But overall, this pass defense has actually improved quite a bit over the course of the season. And while the Patriots seem to have problems at receiver, they also are playing teams better in coverage than you might realize. Cincinnati's pass success rate defense is 25th in the National Football League. So this is going to be a much easier test. And the whole we're on to Cincinnati thing, I think once again it applies in a situation like this. Julian Edelman may be a top 5 receiver in all of the NFL this week in terms of fantasy stats. So I would not be surprised if he has a huge game. Someone random has a huge game for the Patriots, and I think Tom Brady turns this thing around in a hurry. I think the Patriots cover the spread.
I think they cover because of their defense. If they do, Bill Belichick off of a loss. The last 22 times the Patriots have lost, it's gone under 17 times out of those 22. I like the under in here, 41.5. I see a very boring, slow, meticulous game plan from Brady and company, eking something out, not eking it out, but grinding it out, 21-10, somewhere in that range. I think it'll be a close cover, but a more easy under. All right, one more early game to get to, and we've been agreeing a lot. I know I've heard that word. I agree with you, Dave. I know you don't agree with me on this one because I like the Detroit Lions to beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I am not convinced that Tampa needs to be favored by almost 6 points on the road against any team in the NFL. And clearly, to me, Detroit is not in that discussion as one of the worst teams, when you're talking about the Bengals and the Giants. So 5.5 on the road against Detroit, way too many for me to lay. Explain why you think that the Tampa is the right side in this game.
I think Tampa's on the right side in this game to the point where I would even move the spread by several points because Detroit ranks 26 in pass defense success rate. So this may be a time where Jameis Winston throws for 300, 350 yards. And yeah, I know he has a lot of turnover-worthy throws and he has that occasional fumble. He always shoots himself in the foot, it seems like. But he still gets chunk plays and he still scores a good number of points. And especially in this matchup, he should be able to. So then you look at David Blau for Detroit and sort of this offense in general. and they have struggled lately. I mean, they nearly got shut out a week ago, and they haven't really impressed in general. So I would not be surprised if this is finally Tampa Bay's defense being able to enforce its will here. So this could very well be like a 21-3 kind of a game. And I think Tampa Bay wins this handily.
All right, we just covered each and every one of the 1 o'clock Eastern time kickoff. Now it's time to talk about which player gets into the end zone first. So, Ed, we'll look at the odds here and come up with who we think will score the first touchdown today. It's a very fun bet that you can make at sportsbook.fanduel.com. You see Saquon Barkley there, McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Chris Carson. Are you going to go with one of those running backs, or are you going to think that it could be somebody else on that list, or maybe somebody that is not even showing up on the list? Who's the first one to score a touchdown today?
Yeah, running backs make a lot of sense because once you get into the red zone, you want to do something reliable, and that's usually the best time to run. And so then I look at the games where I'm expecting the most points, and I definitely think this Texans-Titans game will be a bit of an air raid, a lot of points scored here. And Derrick Henry makes a lot of sense. The Titans really want him to shine and sort of be the bell cow skill player as far as that offense is concerned. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Ryan Tannehill throws one deep, and then in a short yardage, first and goal from the 3 kind of a situation that you do your basic handoff, little draw up the middle, and then Derrick Henry takes care of it.
I see 2 Chiefs showing up on that page, and Tyreek Hill, always the one that I think can get that long bomb and make something happen very, very quick. If the Chiefs are the first to get the ball, that's the guy I'll go to, Tyreek Hill, with the long touchdown completion from Patrick Mahomes. Remember, you can make that wager at sportsbook.fanduel.com or on the FanDuel Sportsbook app, which you can download right now for free. And when you do that, you're going to get a risk-free bet up to $500 in site credit. If you lose that first wager, you'll be refunded into your account. And on top of that, a free $25 bet to use however you like. Make sure you use that promo code MOREWAYS25, and you are good to go. When we come back, we'll talk about the afternoon games, the Sunday night game, and the Monday night football game as well between the Colts and the Saints. Stay right there. More ways to win coming back right after this.
Never miss a moment of the action with the brand new Watch TVG app, available in high definition on Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and Roku. Finally, you can enjoy your favorite racing from the best tracks in the U.S. and across the globe without a cable subscription. And better yet, we'll bring you exclusive content, expert handicapping, and the latest news from the racing world 24 hours a day. Download the Watch TVG app now. TVG, your best bet.
More ways, fans, you need to know about the new and improved Watch TVG app, where you can stay connected to key betting info and watch all our great TVG racing. It's available on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire and Fire Stick. TVG account holders simply go to your connected device and download the app. Folks interested in sports betting can access the FanDuel odds feed that shows betting lines from all the major pro and college sports. Racing fans can see every TVG and TVG2 race on separate channels, or a third racing option, the TVG Racebook, that displays both networks on top of 3 track feeds. Another option, Racing Now, allows you to watch select tracks full screen. Finally, we have TVG's Content Marketplace, where you can see races and interviews and stories you missed along the way, with more ways to win clips and handicapping segments. Everything you need in one place, the Watch TVG app. Download it today.
Can get him. Run Happy has won the Myra.com Kings Bishop by 4. Run Happy, standing at Claiborne Farm.
Welcome back to More Ways to Win. I'm Dave Weaver here in L.A. We've got Edward Egros joining us in Dallas, where there is a big game today. The Dallas Cowboys desperately seeking a win against what I consider the red-hot LA Rams, who have been clicking on offense big time the last couple of weeks. They went to Arizona 2 weeks ago, put up, I think Goff had 400-something yards in the air, came back last week, and another effective performance hitting his receivers. When he has all these guys healthy, Kupp, Cooks, Woods, Gurley, that Rams offense is tough to stop. I do not envision Dallas being able to figure out a way to shut them down. I think the Rams are the right play in this game. You're in Dallas. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to pick the Cowboys, but am I overthinking things here that the Rams just go in there, put up, 25 to 35 points and come away with a win?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I love the Rams offense in this game, and in part because they are using a lot more play action than they did at the start of the year. I mean, that's what the Rams offense basically consisted of last year. It's just a lot, and finally going back to it for some reason. And I think that's in part because they're giving Jared Goff a bit more protection. They're starting to figure out that offensive line. They're able to make that work. And so Goff is certainly a lot more comfortable in the pocket. And I think the beauty of this Rams offense is you really don't know who the key weapon is going to be. Tyler Higbee, the tight end, has been great in certain spots. Robert Woods has been great in certain spots. You mentioned Cooper Kupp, one of my favorite receivers out there. Brandon Cooks is also elite. So who is going to be the playmaker? Who's going to step it up for the Rams? I honestly don't know, and that's actually a good thing for Los Angeles because you're not supposed to know, because then the Cowboys' defense doesn't know. That defense cannot generate pressure like it used to. They can't cover guys like they used to. And overall, I think the Rams should be able to win this football game.
Yeah, I forgot about Higbee. He's really stepped up and been a fantastic receiver option for Jared Goff as well. What is the vibe within the city of Jason Garrett, Jerry Jones, the entire situation with the future of him as the head coach of the Cowboys, the overall morale of the fans within the city? Are people still high on the Cowboys having success up until the start of the playoffs, and if they get in, maybe making some kind of a run, or is the fan base kind of giving up on the Cowboys this year?
There's a lot of frustration. It's very palpable. And even inside the locker room, you're getting a sense from people I've spoken to that they're not necessarily giving up on Jason Garrett. I don't think he's lost the locker room, but there's definitely a sense of an overwhelming frustration. The leadership really hasn't been there like maybe it has in seasons past. And I think that's in large part because there's not necessarily that one veteran who is allowed to tell everybody what to do. I mean, Jason Witten had that role for a long time, but he's a good bit older now. He doesn't have the yards after catch that you would expect from an outstanding tight end. He's not used very much, yet he's still around. And then after that, the leadership really isn't coming from anybody else. There's not that one person who's really getting at everyone's grill and trying to get them motivated. So that's the bigger problem to me. But at the end of the day, when it comes to the Cowboys' playoff positioning, it's more about winning that Eagles game next week and then beating Washington the following week. You win the division at 8-8. And I think fans are more looking forward to that than, say, how this game turns out.
All right, let's move on and come to Los Angeles, where the Chargers are hosting the Minnesota Vikings. Let's go back to the beginning of the year, maybe 3 or 4 weeks in, when Kirk Cousins was just absolutely struggling. I think he might have had 90 yards passing even one game and not putting the ball in the air. You think about where they were at that point and how successful they've been now in the passing game and the running game, clearly with Dalvin Cook, and the success of the Vikings at this point, atop the division, fighting it out with the Green Bay Packers to try to take the North. They've come a long way, is what I'm saying. And overall, through the 14 weeks, the Minnesota Vikings have been pretty damn good. Can they come to L.A., get a win here against the Chargers, or are they maybe looking ahead because next week they play the Packers on Monday Night Football, a huge game for them next week, but you can't afford to overlook this one?
I don't think they're overlooking it necessarily. I think the Vikings understand that the margin of error is very small. And I also think that Kirk Cousins is playing like an elite quarterback, continues to be near the top among all quarterbacks in completion percentage over expected plus EPA per play. Phillip Rivers does have a lot of yards, yes, but he also has a lot of turnover-worthy throws, almost inexplicable at times. Plus, I'm told by my friends in Los Angeles that the Chargers' home field advantage is not much of an advantage. So I will take the Vikings.
Well, here's one other thing, though. The Vikings are 9-4 on the year, 6-0 at home and 3-4 on the road. So going outside of Minnesota has not been that friendly to them.
I understand that, but this is also a game where if this gets into a shootout, I trust the Vikings a good bit more. Yeah, Austin Eckler has done very well as a receiving running back for the Chargers. Hunter Henry has become a premier tight end in football. He's someone I'm expecting to have a big game, for whom I'm expecting to have a big game. And so the total, I'm going with the over here. But if it does get to be a shootout, I just naturally trust the Vikings more.
All right, just a couple of more afternoon games, Ed, to talk about. So we're going to move on to the next one, which will be the Raiders in the final game ever played in Oakland. Their final two games this year are both on the road. So this will be the last game for the Raiders in Oakland before they move to Las Vegas next year. They host the Jacksonville Jaguars. The line here a bit essentially has been this all week long, 6.5. Minus 290 on the money line, totals 46.5. And the Jacksonville defense has just been laying down, specifically late in games and allowing a ton of points in the third and fourth quarter. Can the Raiders take advantage of a team that is not playing that well right now and win one for that home crowd one final time?
Well, neither team's really playing very well right now. Derek Carr actually had one of the better total quarterback ratings in football last week, yes, but he has had a clunker recently, and that's part of a 3-game losing skid. It's the defense that has really let Oakland down, and I think that's going to be an opportunity for Gardner Minshew to kind of keep things interesting. He does have DJ Chark. He does have Chris Conley. He does have Dede Westbrook. So overall, this receiving core can help Minshew stay in this football game. I'm not picking the Jaguars to win outright, but I think they can cover here.
Chark is going to miss this week, so he'll be missing his number one, but he'll still have Westbrook. I think, and I said this last week too, so it didn't work out when they had 2 home games left. Oh, they're going to win this one for the crowd, and they got beat 42-21 against the Titans. But this is the last chance to do something for this, fan base. It's been around for decades, and we'll see if the Raiders show up. I think they will. I'm willing to lay the 6.5 and think that they can win by at least a touchdown. Let's stay on the West Coast and not too far from where the Raiders are playing. We're going to San Francisco, where the Niners are hosting the Atlanta Falcons and Matt Ryan. That's a big number, too. A 10.5-point spread for Matt Ryan. You haven't seen it much in his career. I think only 2 times, including once this year when he was even a bigger underdog than that, a 14-point underdog when the Saints hosted the Falcons a few weeks back. And Matt Ryan and the Falcons won. So to give a guy with this much ability 10.5 points, I'm taking the Falcons.
I'm going to take the Niners here, and I understand why there's a lot of cynicism as far as how good San Francisco is, even despite what happened last week, in large part because the strength of schedule was very weak at the start of the year. But then the Niners traded for Emmanuel Sanders, and he has single-handedly swayed the data in favor of San Francisco. Be careful with scoring offense ranks and really any success rate ranks now that the passing attack is far improved with Jimmy G, having a deep threat that he's comfortable with. Not to mention George Kittle has been outstanding. And so, yeah, this could very well be a shootout, but I think somehow the Niners will be able to cover a rather large spread in a shootout.
Well, that's what we had last week, 48-46 when they beat the Saints, and that was a scoregami, Ed, a first ever point total final in the NFL. We've never seen a 48-46 before, so that happened. But the total here is 48.5. The Niners almost got that on their own last week, and now, the Falcons like to put up points. Is this an easy over bet?
I think it's a very easy over bet. I mentioned that the Niners can score. The Falcons can score as well. Matt Ryan ranks 12th in completion percentage over expected and EPA per play. Jimmy G is 9th. And so it's also a narrative, because if you think the Falcons are going to cover in a game like this, then that means they're definitely scoring at will. So regardless of how you think the spread may go here, I still believe, regardless, that both offenses are going to be scoring handily. So I'd take the over.
All right, the next game for me is an over bet, and we're going to Arizona, where we have the Heisman winner from last year, Kyler Murray, going against the Heisman winner from the year before, Baker Mayfield. We got the Browns and the Cardinals. The Browns are a 3-point favorite on the road. The total here same as we just saw in the Atlanta 49er game, exactly 48.5. I think we're going to see a lot of deep passes in this game for Baker Mayfield. I think Arizona is going to play it at a fast pace. We've seen that much of the year where they like to put the ball in the air. I think we're going to see some points in this one.
I completely agree. Arizona's fast-paced offense means more possessions for everyone. Cleveland has always been hampered by penalties, odd play calls, and things like that. But against a weak pass defense, Baker Mayfield can shine. He still has elite targets, and yeah, they've been lackluster at times. But I think when the challenge is easier, don't be surprised if Baker Mayfield has one of those 40-point type performances. I think the conditions are ripe here for an over.
Well, if he does that, then that means he's going to hit his total on this passing yards prop, 262.5 yards for Baker Mayfield. That is a bet that I'm going to be making an over on, Ed. Would you agree?
Completely agree. I think with more possessions and a weaker pass defense, this could be one of Baker's better games for the entire season. Yeah, I know it gets to be a little hit and miss as far as he's concerned, because that offensive line can be very much hit or miss. It's still a really good offense.
Well, about a 40-yard dip when we take a look at Kyler Murray and his passing total, 226.5. Would you also go over on that quarterback?
I think I would go over here in large part. I mentioned the possessions and the pace of play and all that stuff, but I also think Arizona is going to be trailing, perhaps significantly so. And so the only way you're going to get back into it is by throwing the football, and perhaps even deep for a lot of chunk play attempts. And so I think he'll connect with a few of those. And so, yeah, I'd go with the over.
All right, let's continue to talk some prop bets. We've covered all of the games up until the Sunday night game and the Monday night game. So let's talk props. Let's go to the Dallas Rams game and start with Jared Goff on his passing touchdowns. Ooh, I'm loving this. I think this is a little bit too low. 1.5 passing touchdowns for Goff.
I'm going to take the over here. I think because they have so many weapons, I'm not sure the Cowboys defense is going to know who to cover and how to cover them. And they may do a number of different things in terms of zone schemes and things like that to try and confuse Jared Goff, but it's just not going to work. I think he'll have enough chunk plays. He'll find Tyler Higbee or Cooper Kupp or somebody random. I think the play action will open things up significantly for him, and so I'm taking the over.
Well, what does the play action do to the running back himself, and that is Todd Gurley? You're going to get rushing and receiving yards both combined, the total 86.5. Will he hit this number?
It's interesting because last year in that playoff loss for the Cowboys, the Rams mentioned out loud publicly that they knew what this Cowboys defense was doing because they were able to figure out tells in terms of certain stunts and things like that this Cowboys line was trying to execute. And also, too, Cowboys have not generated too many pressures, and so they may feel like they can kind of run at will as far as the Rams are concerned. And so Todd Gurley had a phenomenal game the last time these two met. And I'm not exactly sure if the Cowboys defense has done anything drastic to try and address those concerns in terms of being figured out or having those tells basically broadcasted to everybody. So I would definitely take the over here. He may get it in rushing alone, much less receiving.
Well, here's a very interesting one on the other side with Dak Prescott, because the Rams defense has been better since Jalen Ramsey's come aboard. But this also seems like a little bit of a low number for Dak, who's been, getting 300 yards in most of his games. 283.5 for the passing yards for Dak Prescott. Over or under?
I'm going to take the over here because I think Dak Prescott is still one of the better quarterbacks in the National Football League. And also, too, and we've seen this over the last few games where the Cowboys trail, sometimes significantly so, and then Dak Prescott basically has to throw the football a good bit more. And I think that's going to happen again. I can see the Rams getting out to an early lead and everything having to revolve around Dak. And I do think he'll get to 300 that way. If it's a close game, though, then maybe that's where things change because the Cowboys do love using Ezekiel Elliott, but only when the game is close or if the Cowboys have a lead, maybe even a comfortable lead. But I don't think either of those things are going to be happening. So I think Dak has to throw it more, and I think he will hit the total.
So if you think the Rams are going to be up, then do you bet the under here with Ezekiel Elliott? We're talking yards, rushing and receiving, triple digits here, 105.5.
I'm going to go with the under here because one of the big things that this Cowboys offense has done differently under offensive coordinator Kellen Moore is they're not using Zeke as a receiver nearly as much as they did last year when Zeke was the number one receiver for the Cowboys. That's in part because I don't think they trusted Dak as a thrower very much, but Kellen Moore does trust Dak as a thrower a good bit more. And so Zeke only runs basically short routes, not much more down the field, or at least hardly ever down the field. And so it'll be a lot of handoffs to him, but I do trust this LA Rams defense to be able to contain Zeke just enough. I'm going to take the under.
All right, let's talk Vikings-Chargers, and specifically about quarterback Kirk Cousins, who I think is going to be in for a long game. I like what I've seen lately from the Chargers pass defense, both what they can do getting to the quarterback and the secondary. 253.5 yards for Kirk Cousins. I think it's going to land under this, maybe in the 230 range. What do you think?
I'm going to take the over here. And what's interesting is that Kirk Cousins did not have Adam Thielen for a little while, sort of his number one target. And it's been interesting, this sort of roller coaster when you look at the 2019 Minnesota Vikings, where at the start of the year, it was Adam Thielen there, essentially playing well, but he wasn't getting the football, and you didn't know how things were going to go as far as this running game was concerned, that they were emphasizing, and then pass just wasn't. He becomes this incredible quarterback, and then he loses sort of the training wheels, as it were, and he's still able to be an effective quarterback. And so for some reason, Kirk Cousins, who couldn't figure it out at the start of the year, now can and did not have a key weapon. I think, once again, Kirk Cousins is going to show what he's capable of, so I'm taking the over. All
right, let's talk about Phillip Rivers, who knows how to throw a 90-yard touchdown. He did that last week. That would help this prop. 267.5 yards. Can he get it against this Minnesota defense?
I think he can. What's interesting, though, is I'm not sure the Chargers offense will score too many points. I'm not sure how effective they're going to be consistently in the red zone. Red zone stats are volatile. I understand that. But those turnover-worthy throws by Rivers, my goodness, they just cripple this offense and what they're capable of doing in terms of scoring. And this is despite having good receivers, even running backs who can catch the ball effectively. So I do believe the chunk plays are there for Phillip Rivers. I just don't think they're going to score too many points, and that's why I think the Vikings win this game and cover. But as far as this prop is concerned, yeah, I'll take the over.
All right, if you want to make some wagers on these prop bets, make sure you sign up for a FanDuel Sportsbook account. You can download the free FanDuel Sportsbook app. Use that promo code MOREWAYS25. What's cool is you can make those prop bets separately, or you can also include them in the same game parlays that are available at sportsbook.fanduel.com. So check it out, sign up for an account, use the promo code MOREWAYS25. You're going to get a risk-free bet up to $500, and you can use that $25 free bet any way you would like. Still two games to talk about when we come back. Ed, we'll be talking about the late game here on Sunday between the Bills and the Steelers, and then tomorrow night's Monday night matchup between the Colts and the Saints. We'll be right back to talk about those two games.
I think Run Happy has a lot of things going for him. Obviously, he's been very respected, and to give people further incentive to buy them for where they can take an offspring, run it, and if they win, they're going to get a $100,000 bonus for each Run Happy they have. It's another selling point from our perspective that really helps us promote the horses that we're representing and we're selling.
Run Happy, standing at Claiborne Farm.
If you're over the age of 50 and considering buying an annuity in the next 60 days, I have some important news for you. Don't buy an annuity until you understand the pros and cons of annuities. A free book to help you maximize your retirement income from television host and three-time author Josh Melberg has been released. This book reveals little-known truths about annuity strategies in simple-to-understand terms. Grab a pen right now because we are about to offer you this free book that unlocks the 5 little-known secrets we believe baby boomers and seniors should know before buying an annuity.
Call 800-474-0908 now.
And you'll receive a free copy of Josh Melberg's book, Next Gen Annuity Strategies Revealed. As a bonus, we'll also send you the #1 mistakes retirees are making with their investments today, and a free DVD on how you can get up to 33% more income in retirement.
Call 800-474-0908
to have your free information kit rushed to your door.
Again, that's 800-474-0908. They say less is more, but we believe more is more. That's why we build FanDuel Sportsbook with more ways to bet, more ways to fund your account, more ways to cash in, and more ways to cash out, with payouts delivered straight to your bank account in as little as 48 hours. You want more? You got it. Join today and get a risk-free bet worth up to $500. FanDuel Sportsbook. More ways to win.
And welcome back to More Ways to Win. Moving on, let's talk about the Sunday night matchup between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Buffalo Bills. The Bills have been good, Ed, on the road, 5-1. Away from Buffalo. Steelers have been good at home, 5-2, and have won 7 out of 8 after starting the season just 1-4. Amazing to think that Mike Tomlin and the Steelers are where they are at this point in the season, currently with a wild card position. And Buffalo Bills also right now a wild card team. Steelers a 1-point favorite here at home, a very low total, 37.5. That's actually up from 36.5 earlier in the week. How do you see this game playing out?
Is it possible that Devlin Hodges is the better quarterback in this matchup? I think it is very conceivable, in large part because I think Mike Tomlin is one of the better coaches in the National Football League. Several games above 500 in his career with a backup quarterback. And now Hodges has used James Washington more effectively now than any quarterback before the duck caller. The receiving core, I do believe, is better than Buffalo's receiving core with John Brown and with Cole Beasley. Two good receivers, but I think the overall collective for the Steelers is a good bit better, and that's why I think Pittsburgh will cover.
Well, you mentioned that you think Hodges might be the better quarterback in this matchup, maybe in the air, but on the ground, Josh Allen still has that ability to be elusive and to make first downs and move the chains with his legs. Let's talk about prop bet here involving Josh Allen on the ground. These are rushing yards, 30.5. And I bet on him under in a couple of games this year and lost. So I'm realizing that he can get 30 in one carry if he sees a little bit of an opening down the field.
Yeah, he certainly could, and this one's a little bit tricky because how many design runs are going to be there for him, especially with a Steelers front that's really good, and now the secondary has been elite with Minkah Fitzpatrick, so there may not be too many opportunities for Josh Allen to throw it down the field, may not be too many opportunities to hand it off either, and so really the most effective thing for him is to have a couple of quarterback design runs or maybe just scrambles for a couple of first downs, and so because of that, because I do like the Steelers defense, what tends to happen, as you know, defense does well covering receivers, can't run, so quarterback has to take off. And so I think he'll do that enough times. I'm going to say the over here because it may be sort of running for his life, and then a couple of times he's able to get 15 to 20 yards.
Well, we'll see if the Steelers defense can keep him under the 30.5. But let's talk passing offense for Duck Hodges and the Steelers. This is about the number that I've seen in the last couple of weeks with him starting under 200 yards, actually even under 190, 188.5. It seems so low and it seems so easy. And then you check the box score at the end of the game and he has 167 yards. Even though he looks effective and the Steelers are winning, he's not putting up gaudy numbers in the air. What do you think?
So, granted, it is a super small sample size, but Hodges' total QBR ranked 14th in football last week and 22nd the week before that. So there's definitely a lot of potential with this young man. And like I said before, Juju Smith-Schuster coming back, I think, is really significant. He has more weapons to throw to now, and I think the coaching staff will trust Hodges to throw the football a good bit more, especially at home. So I think this is a situation where he can finally have that breakout party, and I'm going to go with the O.
All right, let's talk about the final game of the week that'll be taking place on Monday night, that being between the Colts and the Saints. Saints a 9.5-point favorite. This was as low as 8.5 earlier, so now getting closer to 10. I like the Colts in this spot, specifically because they really don't seem to be blown out all that often. They had an unfortunate game where they lost by 14, where they had a blocked field goal run back, and then they ended up giving another touchdown after that. But that was a tie game. Last week they were winning going into 3 minutes left, and they lost to Tampa. So you have one team that seems to play close and another in the Saints that really doesn't blow teams out all that often. They were a big favorite against Carolina and were able to barely win that one. I just don't see the Saints, winning this thing by 30. I think it'll come down to something happening in the fourth quarter that the Saints eventually win the game. But I'm not convinced that they have to win by 10.
I know those high-profile games for New Orleans certainly suggest that they're always going to be close, and somehow New Orleans almost always ekes one out. Maybe not against San Francisco, but they almost always do at home. Here's the thing, though. T.Y. Hilton's status does matter significantly for this Colts offense. Otherwise, it becomes patchwork, and yeah, it can function in spots, but it cannot keep up with Drew Brees and Michael Thomas. Thomas has an absurd catch percentage, especially with contested catches. It's been unbelievable to watch Drew Brees in terms of his expected completion percentage and his completion percentage over expected plus EPA per play. He is almost always at the top of the leaderboard, and it's almost always because of one guy, Michael Thomas. So I do expect the Saints to score 30, 34 points. I just don't know how the Colts are going to be able to keep up with a lack of targets. And so I actually like the Saints here.
Do you use last week's game as when you're looking at what's happening this week at all, or it's a new game and you just forget what happened? Because they had a huge lead early against the 49ers. This is a huge matchup, for playoff seeding within the NFC. They blow that lead, and then they still have a chance to win it, ultimately losing 48-46. Does that linger with the Saints, or do you just treat this as a whole nother game and pretend like that never even happened?
It depends. I think what I like to do, more generally speaking, is when I look at last week, I thought that was lucky, unlucky, something volatile, something that you cannot rely upon from week to week. When I talk about regression to the mean a lot, it's because there's something that happened that is not that cannot be recreated. And so when it comes to the Saints, there were some costly turnovers there that I think mattered a good bit. And also, too, I think when they got that last touchdown, I think they just scored too early. Had they been a little bit more methodical, the Saints would have won that game. Defensively, they couldn't do very much. But this is a very different offense for the Colts than it is for the 49ers. Even though I like Jacoby Brissett, I think things are starting to fall apart. At some point, you cannot maintain a certain level of success when you just don't have the weapons. And that's why I'm talking about T.Y. Hilton as being a really important piece in terms of understanding how this game's going to go. But as it stands right now, I do think the Saints cover.
Well, Pascal did step up with some big catches last week for Jacoby Brissett and the Colts. So let's talk a prop bet on him. Look, Jimmy G was able to put up a lot of yards last week against the Saints. Can Jacoby Brissett do the same? His total here, passing yards, 232.5.
Certainly, when you talk about Pascal, I get it in that if the defense doesn't know who to key upon and they don't have that one guy you take away, then that makes it a whole lot tougher to game plan. And so I definitely understand the rationale there. But the Saints defense is inconsistent, but it also means they can have good performances. And so you follow up the bad one with a good one because it's volatile and inconsistent. I'm going to take the under.
Let's talk about the running back for the Colts and Marlon Mack. He started off the season so good, very reliable. Got hurt, broke his hand. He's coming back from that last week. Now he's got another week under his belt. If this is the Marlon Mack of, the first 5 weeks of the season, 61.5 rushing yards, seems like a slam dunk. But, we're in week 15 now, and it's a whole different part of the season.
It is, but I do believe Marlon Mack can hit the over, in large part because the Colts do love running the football a good bit more than throwing it. When you look at the run-pass ratios, I think the Colts run it almost as much as anybody in the National Football League, and that's because they love this offensive line. And even when Marlon Mack wasn't a part, backup running backs were still able to perform very well for Indianapolis. And so now you're putting the bell cow in there, so they're going to run it a good bit more because that's what they trust out there with Frank Reich. So, yeah, I like the over.
All right, let's talk about Drew Brees. And to think we could have one quarterback earlier, Duck Hodges, 188.5 yards, and Drew Brees, 303.5 yards. Not only so much just the difference of the skill level of these two guys, but just different matchups. Of course, Hodges playing the Bills, and now the Saints get to play the Colts, which that defense gave up a lot of yards last week against Jameis Winston and the Bucs. So that seems like an obtainable number for Brees, 303.5. What do you think?
I think it is. And look, there's a possibility that the Colts will keep up any shootout with the Saints. And if that's the case, then Drew Brees will have to throw it a good bit more. And yeah, you have the occasional target you haven't heard of in New Orleans who's catching a touchdown, but that's what they do over there. They like to mix things up. And as reliable as Michael Thomas is, there's always somebody random scoring a touchdown, it seems like, for New Orleans. So I would not be surprised if that happens once again. And through chunk plays with Michael Thomas, yeah, I think you hit the over here.
Well, he's 303.5, which means he needs to get 200 other yards if Michael Thomas gets what he's expected to get, which is 103.5. He's not going to get 3 catches of 40 yards, but he could get 12 catches of 8 yards and another one of 10 yards and find his way at 103.5. So reliable on those short routes. So if you're going to end up getting this number, you're going to pretty much dink and dunk. It's not going to be a big home run. I mean, I guess there's one of these games he's going to break a big one, but it seems like you could at least count on him to get a lot of small catches.
Exactly right. It may be one of those things where it's 12, 15, maybe even 20 receptions, but somehow he gets to the 103.5. And that's what he does best. When you look at how many receivers in the National Football League have, say, 50, 60 targets or more, then Michael Thomas is leading everybody in completion percentage, in catches, not necessarily yards after catch, but the number of catches per target. The rate is always very high, and it's absurdly high when you consider all of the other guys who are having to buy in bulk. It's amazing how reliable this young man is, and so I don't see why this is going to be any different, especially against a patchwork defense in Indianapolis.
Well, check out this bet that's available on the FanDuel Sportsbook app and at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Who will be the number 1 seed in the NFC? And this game obviously has a big implication on that. Should the Saints win, they'll keep up their chances that they can go back to being the number 1 seed. But right now, the 49ers hold that top spot. Then you see Seattle, Saints, and the Packers right now the 4th choice.
I think there's some real value when it comes to the Seahawks. I do believe the Niners and Seahawks have to play each other again, if I'm not mistaken. So that certainly matters, even though the Niners had the lead and they have probably the most impressive win against the Saints on the road. At the same time, yeah, Seattle lost that game to the Rams, but the Rams have certainly gotten a lot better. Russell Wilson can be volatile in terms of when he's under pressure or when he's having to play outside the pocket. But overall, I think with what Russell Wilson has been able to do for the entire season, basically bailing out his entire football team, I would not be surprised if he has just enough of those performances to land that number 1 seed.
Well, according to those odds there, the winner of the NFC West is going to be the number 1 seed because those are the top 2 favorites. So let's just eliminate the Saints and the Packers and narrow this down to a match race between these 2 teams. Well, I guess you got the Rams too, but let's talk who is going to win the NFC West. Is it going to be the 49ers or is it going to be the Seahawks? I mean, if you think these odds are a little bit more favorable for you, if you want to avoid the Saints and the Packers jumping up, then you can just make this wager too, who wins the NFC West.
Absolutely you can. And again, it goes back to who has the most value in this situation. And yeah, the Niners are ahead right now, and I understand why. But I do believe the Niners have a tougher schedule down the stretch than Seattle does. So keep that in mind in terms of placing your wagers. But to me, I've liked the Seahawks from the very beginning because Russell Wilson is playing at an MVP caliber level, probably even more so than Lamar Jackson. And I think that's because Jackson has a better infrastructure around him than Russell Wilson does. Wilson has had to bail out this team a lot. I expect he will continue to, and that's why I think the Seahawks win the division.
Let's talk Super Bowl winner, and it's fun. I've kind of updated a spreadsheet at home week 1 before the season started, week 4. I need to do it now, and it's amazing where every week it seemed like Patriots early on, and now everybody is thinking that Baltimore is a Super Bowl winner. They are heavily favored here over the 49ers and the Saints, and now the Patriots went from being plus 250, I think, at one point, all the way up to, over close to 6-1 odds. Are the Ravens going to get this thing done, or does Lamar Jackson get to the postseason and there's a little bit of a more pressure for him to win games and he doesn't have the same success that he's had throughout the entire regular season?
I think this is the best time to pounce on the Patriots. Tom Brady has done this several times, and what Bill Belichick loves to do is not put just a ton on film in the beginning, but then he really shows what he's capable of in the playoffs. I look at that Baltimore-New England game, and it was interesting that the Patriots did not do very much defensively like they normally would going up against a mobile quarterback who loves the read option. So I think now is the time to bet on the Patriots because they're going to pick it up.
All right, that is a wrap on hour number one here of More Ways to Win. Don't go anywhere, Ed. We're going to start it all over. And in this hour, we'll be talking to the pro football doc, Dr. David Chow, as well, talking to him about some key injuries. Hour number two of More Ways to Win starts now. And welcome to More Ways to Win. Dave Weaver here in our Los Angeles studios. We'll be bringing in Ed Egros shortly to talk about these games. And let's start with that AFC South matchup between the Tennessee Titans at home hosting the Houston Texans, a 3-point home favorite. Can the Texans go in there and steal one and perhaps steal the division? A huge game there in the AFC South. What about in the NFC? Very important game for both the Rams, who head to Dallas, and the Cowboys themselves needing a win to fight it out with the Philadelphia Eagles within their division. The Rams are fighting for a wild card spot. This line opened with the Rams an underdog, but the Rams are now the favorite in this game. We'll talk about that matchup. And then later on tonight, a wild card. Right now, both the Bills and the Steelers with those wild card spots. They both need a win to stay up there and make the playoffs. The Steelers, a 1.5-point home favorite against the Buffalo Bills, who are 9-4 and have done very well, 5-1 on the road. So that'll be a fun game to talk about. And the guy that's going to join me to talk about these games, sports analytics expert from Dallas, Texas, that is Edward Egros. Hey, Ed.
Hey there, Dave. Week 15 football, and yeah, there's some really exciting games here, and I know the weather is starting to impact a few of them, so there's a lot to keep up with here. Let's do it.
We'll be talking about the spreads, but I think more of the games that I'm going to bet on today will involve the totals. I like a few games to go over pretty easily, and then we'll talk about which ones that we think are going to be low-scoring games as well. I would think Chicago, Green Bay would fit that bill. Let's get right to it, and we'll get started with our first game. That's going to be the Titans hosting the Texans. This a 3-point spread. Tennessee absolutely rolling right now. Ryan Tannehill, since taking over for Marcus Mariota, has been phenomenal. 6-1. 30, 40 points seemingly every single week. I know you're always talking about regression to the mean, but it seems like when you're talking about Ryan Tannehill, you're never worried about him coming back to earth. How long can he just continue to float up here in orbit above everybody else?
Well, regression to the mean doesn't necessarily have to happen in one game, and I understand he didn't have just the greatest of careers in Miami, but the infrastructure in Tennessee is a good bit better than anything Tannehill ever had up to this point. Also, having Derrick Henry and a great offensive line run blocking for him certainly helps the cause, but number of great receivers for Tannehill to throw to. Success rate in terms of passing has been unbelievable. Prior to when Tannehill took the starting role, that this passing success rate for the Titans was 35%. It was 31st in football, but now they are third best in football at 52%. Having Derrick Henry again helps a good bit. Overall infrastructure a lot better than anything he's ever had. And so I think it's okay to trust Ryan Tannehill, especially against a weak Houston defense. I'm taking the Titans to cover.
And how much can we trust Derrick Henry today? A little bit dinged up. Do you think we're going to get 100% out of him?
Even if we don't, I still trust this offensive line. I think they're still going to be in pretty good shape. And so, yeah, maybe you have to switch things up just a little bit, but I'm not too concerned.
Biggest total of the week here in Week 15, 50.5 points between two offenses that really have some quick passing attack options where you can get a touchdown, a 3-play drive in 50 seconds from either of these offenses. And despite Houston really laying an egg last week and not putting up much points against the Denver Broncos, I think they bounce back, put up points. Tennessee, we know, is going to get theirs. This is one of my stronger overs of the week. I just can't envision these defenses being able to hold either of these hot quarterbacks to a touchdown each. I think this is going to be a 5, 6, 7 touchdown game. mix in a good chunk of field goals as well, and this is an easy over.
I agree with you. And I think when we talk about regression to the mean, you can also have positive regression to the mean. And I think that's what we're going to see from Deshaun Watson. Yeah, not the greatest of performances last week, but 10 of 13 games for Watson this season, his total QBR has been above 50. So he's almost always above average. And, of course, we talked about Ryan Tannehill and how well he's playing and how well Derrick Henry has complemented the passing attack for the Titans. So I think both offenses are going to perform well. So I would also go with the over.
All right, from a high-scoring game to what could be a low-scoring game, if that's what we can get out of what we saw in Week 1 between the Bears and the Packers. It was a 10-3 final in Week 1 with the Packers winning in Chicago. Now they're going to be in Lambeau. I like the Bears. 3.5-point underdog here. Trubisky is finally playing with confidence. TVs are probably back on in the locker room because everybody has good things to say about him. He's running the ball, too. That has been something that if you watched him, 3-4 weeks ago, he wasn't scrambling like he did last year. Now he is running the ball. He has no problem just putting it down and going for 10 or 15 yards if he needs to. I don't think he's worried about the hip any longer. He probably feels healthy enough to run right through some Packers defenders if he feels he needs to pick up a first down. I think the Bears are playing well enough right now to win this game. They sacked Aaron Rodgers 5 times in week number 1. Of course, they didn't win the game ultimately because they only put 3 points up on the board. But their offense playing better right now. Robinson, Montgomery. I think Trubisky's got some guys that he can definitely pick up 24, 27 points with, and that's going to be plenty to beat the Packers if they can hold them to that 10 points again.
Yeah, Allen Robinson has been an outstanding receiver in the entire landscape of the NFL, so no doubt about that. I also want to talk about the Chicago defense because, yeah, they don't have the turnovers like they did last season, but the unit is still above average. They still have a lot of good playmakers. Now, I don't know how poorly the Roquan Smith injury is going to affect things, but still, this is a solid unit from top to bottom. It's just they don't have the takeaways like they did a season ago. And so I do believe they're going to contain Aaron Rodgers and this rushing attack, and I would not be surprised if this is a tight game. I think that half-a-point hook is perhaps the biggest reason why I love the Bears covering a game like this. Yeah, it's in Lambeau, and I would not be surprised if Packers staff installs a few extra television monitors just to troll Mitch Trubisky just a little bit. But I don't necessarily trust a home field advantage in a game like this when 2 defenses will probably be playing very well. So, yeah, I think the Bears can cover the spread.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a close one and a low-scoring one as well. A lot of games I have a good feeling, what is going to happen, make a final prediction, and it comes pretty close. This next game, as we talk about the Eagles going to Washington to play the Redskins as a 6.5-point favorite, I have no idea. I could see the Eagles winning 31-10, or I could see the Redskins winning 31-10. I really could see this going either way because the Eagles are so unpredictable. Actually, they haven't been unpredictable. They've been predictable. They haven't been very good as a big favorite over really the entire season. You go back, pick a week. They're an unreliable team to lay points. I can't trust them giving up 6.5.
When we have the conversation for the worst team in the NFL, I think Washington has to be a part of that discussion, in large part because they try and run the football a lot, and A, they don't have Darius Geis anymore, and B, this offensive line has not been playing at an elite level. Now, certainly what they do in the offseason can help with that. The infrastructure is such to where that rookie quarterback in Dwayne Haskins, certainly is a great place to start in terms of the rebuilding process, but that's going to take some time. And if they're scoring 10, 13, 14 points, which is about right for Washington, then the Eagles need 21, 24. And with what they do in 2 tight end personnel, it's very methodical. It's not going to be a high scoring performance by Philadelphia, but you trust Zach Ertz in this spot and you trust Dallas Goedert in this spot as well. And so I think it's the tight ends who will help the Eagles cover this rather large spread.
But last week they played a team in that same discussion as one of the worst teams in football. I guess you can put the Bengals in there as well. But they played the Giants at home, and they were basically dead in the water into the fourth quarter, and they somehow, worked out a win. But, I mean, the same argument we're having today, we could have had last week when the Giants were an overvalued favorite. The Eagles were an overvalued favorite. Until they have a week where they look like the Super Bowl Eagles that everybody thought they might be to begin the year, I can't fall for it.
I understand the concerns, and yes, it seems like that all they have at receiver are practice squad players, but in spots they played well, and Carson Wentz can be a good quarterback. He is due for positive regression to the mean. I don't know when it's going to happen, but it has seemed like over these last few weeks that the Eagles and Cowboys are sort of on a collision course where I would not be surprised if the Eagles are on an uptick and the Cowboys are on a downtick, and then the game gets really exciting for next week. But until that happens, I do believe the Eagles are actually going to start to put it together. Also, too, the Giants do have a decent offense. It's not amazing, but it's decent with Saquon Barkley and Darius Slayton, guys like that. But who are the playmakers for Washington? Terry McLaurin? Well, they haven't utilized him very much. And besides him, Washington really doesn't have anything. So even though the Eagles defense can be suspect, I just don't know how Washington keeps up if the Eagles score 17-21.
Is Eagles-Cowboys next week already? It's weird. Like, in my mind, I'm thinking, well, later in the year, these two teams play. Well, we are later in the year. 3 weeks remain. All right, let's talk about Eli Manning, because he had a decent first half last week against the Eagles with a couple of touchdowns in the air and then no offense at all after that. Well, Eli is going to get the start at home here against the Dolphins. The Giants are a 3-point home favorite. Miami plus 148 on the money line looks okay to me, because when you just look at, forget about the first 6 or 7 games this year, but when you look at, let's just say, their last 5 games, this offense looks pretty good, Ed.
Yeah, I think Miami's Dolphins looks good, and Eli Manning, well, he's been good in spots. I mean, certainly his first half was fine, but his second half was absolutely atrocious. It was so bad that Eli Manning wound up finishing last in total QBR among all qualifying quarterbacks last week. It was that bad in the second half, and it's not like this Eagles defense has been able to contain too many decent offenses. And so I think in that particular situation, I just trust Ryan Fitzpatrick a good bit more. Good bit hotter in terms of overall play, certainly more consistent, gotten into a rhythm, in terms of Eli, compared with Eli Manning, who's had to come in, and only this is his second week back. On-target throw percentage is much better for Fitzpatrick. Certainly he's more volatile, but he can exploit a weak Giants pass defense. And Miami may have figured out its run game after being lackluster for so long. So I love the Dolphins to win outright. Give me that money line.
The Giants were 2-2. Now they lost 9 in a row. They're 2-11. And hey, if you're a Dolphins fan, you're coming up from Miami to go to the game, and you get out of the cab to get dropped off at MetLife, and you're like, what is this? It's 30 degrees. I've never been in this type of weather before. And you want to get warm. Jump in one of the shuttles that goes back and forth between MetLife and the FanDuel Sportsbook, and you can warm up. You can make a bet. You can hang out, get some good food, have some drinks, and bet all the games in the comfort of the FanDuel Sportsbook at the Meadowlands. It is literally in the same parking lot as the football stadium. A couple of 100 yards away, but you can take a shuttle that will get you there if you don't want to walk on over there. So make sure, if you're in the area visiting, either, going to a Giants game or a Jets game the next couple of weeks, you won't be doing it during the playoffs because those teams aren't making the playoffs. But if you're in the area, New Jersey, New York, come on by, say hello, check out the top-notch, world-class FanDuel Sportsbook, located at the Meadowlands world-class sports and entertainment complex in East Rutherford, New Jersey. I've been to a lot of sports books, Ed, over the years, and there is nothing like this one. It's basically a 2-tiered, 2-story. There's a sports book when you go up the escalator. There's a huge sports book when you first walk in to the left. There's another sports book when you go to the right. It's so big they couldn't fit it all in one spot. Moving on, let's talk about the Carolina Panthers hosting the Seattle Seahawks. We're getting 5.5 points at home. Seahawks are a minus 260 money line favorite. The total 48.5. Can Russell Wilson do what he's done all year long, and that is get wins out of the Seattle Seahawks, whether it's home or the road? It seems like the Seahawks to play hard until the end. Not the case, I guess, last week was probably their worst game of the season when they didn't really hold much of a chance throughout against the Rams. But do they get back on track here against Carolina, who has not been playing good?
I think Seattle will win the football game. I do not trust them to cover 5.5 for really two big reasons. Number one, West Coast team flying to the East Coast for a 1 o'clock kickoff. And even though it does seem like a spurious trend, it actually does matter over the course of time. So that's number one. Number two, Russell Wilson is elite, should be a part of the MVP conversation, no doubt about it. And he's bailed out this offense many, many times. But also, he has done well under pressure, and he has done well outside the pocket, but those statistics are largely volatile. I would not be surprised if, say, we see a regression to the mean as far as Wilson's play is concerned, because he just doesn't get the protection that other elite quarterbacks have been getting. Carolina's pass defense success rate is 13th. They are slightly above average in terms of quarterback pressures. So Carolina can do just enough to contain Russell Wilson, which is pretty much containing this entire offense. So I would not be surprised if this is a close game where Carolina covers.
Seattle's taken a little bit of money lately on the money line. Earlier this morning, they were minus 225, now up to minus 260. I like Carolina. I mean, despite their defense being no good, they still have those offensive weapons in Samuel and Moore, McCaffrey. I like the over in this game. I think it'll be a high-scoring affair. You could be right. Seattle ends up winning it, but not covering. But I would take Carolina, the points, and then the over 48.5.
I'm taking the under here. 2 of the last 3 games, Seattle has scored 17 and 12, meaning good pressure can limit Seattle to 21 or less, and I think this Panther defense is capable of doing that. Carolina does have the second fastest pace in football. Seattle is below average, and I think it's the Seahawks who enforce their pace in this game, not the Panthers. I'm taking that.
Now, speaking of pace, it's interesting that the team with the slowest paced team, Ed, believe it or not, is the best team in the league. The Ravens, about 31 seconds per play. So it doesn't necessarily mean when you're scoring all these points, you have to do it with a fast pace. I mean, they're just kind of freakish in some of the stats that they're doing. But I thought it was interesting that the best team runs the slowest offense.
Yeah, it is interesting. And also you want to look at situation neutral pace, because the Ravens are getting out to such enormous leads that they definitely do try and grind out the clock and limit possessions for the opponent. And read options are naturally going to do that. I think it's teams that throw the football a good bit more because of incompletions. That stops the clock going out of bounds in 2-minute drills, things like that. The Ravens just simply haven't had to do that. And so I think it's more of a symptom of them getting out to such huge leads more than necessarily what the offense does in general.
Now let's talk about two teams that many probably feel one high-tempo offense, the Chiefs, and one kind of slower-paced type of offensive output from the Broncos. So the line here seems about what it should be, 9.5. That seems like a legit line. This is not one of my favorite games of the week. I can't get a feel for, is Denver good? Is Denver bad? Their record is not that good, but last week they looked like a playoff team, the way that they went into Houston and thumped the Texans. Drew Lock now has won both of his games as a starter. I could kind of see Denver continuing this streak, and then I could see them getting blown out too, because there have been some games this year where Denver hasn't shown up, and this could be one of them.
Well, I think in part what we're doing is sort of overrating what Drew Lock has done with this offense. And granted, I think Drew Lock is going to be a great quarterback in the National Football League. I really do believe that. But his average depth of target has been just 7 yards per throw. Denver is more concerned about easing him in to professional football than actually trying to win football games. It just so happened that they blew out Houston last week. So I think easing a quarterback in, not to mention the weather is going to be a real concern with a lot of snow and snow that's going to stick. I think that's going to get the ball out of Drew Lock's hands, and it's going to be more of a ground and pound really for both offenses. But then when you take a couple of risks down the field, who do you trust more? I think Pat Mahomes is the obvious answer here. So I still think, despite the weather conditions and Drew Lock playing well, I still like the Chiefs to cover.
This total has dropped. It was 46.5, went to 45.5 earlier in the week. About an hour ago when we were talking about this game, Ed, it was 44.5, and now it is all the way down to 43.5. So that snow clearly having an effect on the way that the bettors are playing this over-under, as the under has dropped yet another point. Let's move on, and we'll talk about the Detroit Lions hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs now come in as a 5.5-point favorite against the Detroit Lions team that has been banged up, to say the least, over the last few weeks. Offensively, the total here, 46.5. Detroit started out, with the leaders in the NFC North. The Bears, Vikings, Packers, Lions, all were in that 2-2, 3-1 range early on. The Lions were surprising some people, but they have not been good the second half of the season. Can they compete here and keep up with Tampa Bay's high-powered offense?
I don't think so. I think Tampa Bay rolls over Detroit. Granted, you're in a dome, and so that should certainly help passing attack, number one. And number two, Jameis Winston, a lot of turnover-worthy throws, a lot of fumbles, a lot of times when he sort of shoots his own offense in the foot, or shoots himself in the foot, both things. Somehow he's still able to get a lot of chunk plays, still able to get 300, 350 yards, and I expect him to do that once again. And then on the other side of the football, do you really trust this Detroit offense to keep up in a shootout? David Blau, even if somehow Matt Stafford were able to come back, just pretending that hypothetically, I still wouldn't trust a rusty quarterback in a situation like this. Jameis Winston just has too many weapons, and there are occasional performances when he does go crazy. And so I will probably bet an alternate spread here to have the Buccaneers win by a couple of touchdowns.
Would you trust a quarterback who broke his thumb? He had a hairline fracture in his thumb last week. He injured it during the game, played through it. So obviously it's something that you can deal with, but I don't know. That sounds a little bit painful to me, trusting him to be able to grip the ball with a hairline fracture in there. Apparently you're okay with that.
Absolutely, I'm okay with it. It's Jameis Winston. He's tough.
Yeah, it's just a broken finger. No, he's good.
Yeah,
all right, so
just a flesh wound.
It's okay. I'm going to take the Lions. Not my favorite play of the game, but I will take the Lions. I just don't think the Bucs deserve to be favored by 5.5 on the road in this league. Let's move on. Talk about the Patriots, who are still fighting to find their offensive rhythm. Tom Brady not looking like the Tom Brady of past because he has nobody to throw the ball to. Edelman's been okay, but other than that, it's just been a rough year for the offense of the Patriots. Defense have been great. They have been winning games because of their defense, and they should be able to shut down the Cincinnati Bengals in this one. They're going to Cincinnati as a 10.5-point favorite. Is that line too big for you, Ed?
Not in this situation. I would not be surprised, and I'd love to know the odds of this happening, but having the Patriots win this football game 14-0 or 17-3, something like that, I think that's a very serious possibility. When we look at this Patriots offense in general, go back to last week, the dirty secret about this Kansas City pass defense is it's not that bad. 12th in football in pass defense success rate. While the Patriots seem to have a problem at receiver, they're also playing teams that are better at coverage than you might realize. Now they're playing Cincinnati. Pass defense success rate for them is 25th. I think any passing attack can exploit that group, especially Tom Brady, especially Julian Edelman, who I think is going to have a monster day. I think the Patriots can take care of this large spread.
And the Bengals are 1-12. I know earlier you said Washington was the worst team or one of the worst teams, but that is a bet that you can make at sportsbook.fanduel.com or on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Who will have the worst record in the league? And really, it's between the Bengals, the Redskins, the Dolphins, the Giants, and even the Cardinals and the Lions are showing up way down on that list. But the Bengals, a heavy favorite to end up with that first draft pick, Ed.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if that happens. And it's really unfortunate for them because I think they still believe they have a future at quarterback. And at least if you have the number 1 overall pick, you get a quarterback, and that's kind of the obvious play to make. But if you have the number 1 pick and you think you're okay at quarterback, then you need to trade down, and not a lot of teams do. They're not necessarily run very well if they have the number one pick in general. So Cincinnati may be in for a world of trouble here. But in terms of the worst regular season record, yeah, I'm going with the favorite.
Yeah, and that's a bet that you're not getting great odds. But there is a bet that you can get great odds on today, and that is who will score the first touchdown. The favorite usually in this bet is right around 20-1, and that is the case. Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, Chris Carson, a lot of running backs there at the top of the list with the favorites. Where are you going to go, Ed? Who gets into the end zone first today?
First thing I do is I look at the game that I think will have the most points, the highest offense, and to me that's going to be the Texans-Titans game. And then I think going running back makes a lot of sense because I think both offenses understand that when you're in the red zone, when you're in first and goal situations, those are the best times to run the football. So I would not be surprised if the Titans win the coin toss. Ryan Tannehill throws a deep ball. They get a first and goal situation. They give it to old Mr. Reliable, Derrick Henry. Then he takes care of business.
I'm going to go with Tyreek Hill, even though we're expecting some snow in that game. Maybe it comes later in the first quarter. We're still okay for Patrick Mahomes to throw a deep ball to Tyreek Hill and be the first one to score today. I'll take a flyer there at looks like 24-1 odds. Make that wager right now at sportsbook.fanduel.com or on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Make sure you sign up for an account. Use the promo code MOREWAYS25, and you'll get a free $25 bet to use however you would like, and also a risk-free bet up to $500 in site credit. So if you make a $500 deposit, you bet that on a game, and you lose, you'll be refunded the $500. If you win, boom, you're up to almost $1,000 in your account. Still a few more games to discuss after this break, and we'll also be talking with Pro Football Doc, Dr. David Chow, to talk about key injuries when we get the inactive and inactives list in just a couple of minutes. We'll have him on the line here when we come back. Stay tuned.
For us handicappers, there's only ever been one way to play. Sure, I can bet my horse, but I can't lock my odds. But there is another way. Betfair has changed the game with more ways to win. With Betfair, I can lock my odds, and I can bet during the race. You've got to try this out. Smart is the new lucky. Claim your $200 welcome bonus. Bet now at betfair.com.
More ways, fans, you need to know about the new and improved Watch TVG app, where you can stay connected to key betting info and watch all our great TVG racing. It's available on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire and Fire Stick. TVG account holders simply go to your connected device and download the app. Folks interested in sports betting can access the FanDuel odds feed that shows betting lines from all the major pro and college sports. Racing fans can see every TVG and TVG2 race on separate channels, or a third racing option, the TVG Racebook, that displays both networks on top of 3 track feeds. Another option, Racing Now, allows you to watch select tracks full screen. Finally, we have TVG's Content Marketplace, where you can see races and interviews and stories you missed along the way, with more ways to win clips and handicapping segments. Everything you need in one place, the Watch TVG app. Download it today.
Run Happy was a really nice racehorse. The biggest attribute that I see about him is the way he stamps his foals. You know, they got big, pretty walks on them. They got good hips and shoulders. Very pretty to look at. And, you know, a real strong hind leg. You know, everything that you're looking for as a racehorse. You know, that's what impresses me.
Run Happy, standing at Claiborne Farm.
Welcome back to More Ways to Win. I'm Dave Weaver, getting a little bit closer to kickoff on Week 15. We're into the afternoon games now, and the Dallas Cowboys are hosting the LA Rams later on today in Dallas. The Cowboys are now a favorite. Ed, this has gone back and forth. The Cowboys opened up as a favorite. The Rams had been anywhere between -1, -1.5 until recently, but now we're seeing that the Cowboys have retaken over the favorites role in this game. So the money going back and forth, my money is going to be on the Rams. I think their offense is finely tuned right now. You look at the injuries that they've had with Cooper Kupp being out sometimes, Woods, Cooks, for all three of them to be on the field at the same time, Jared Goff is in heaven. I mean, he has 3 fantastic number 1 options for the most part that most teams would love to have. And then you've got Higbee contributing. Oh, and not to forget Todd Gurley. There's just too many offensive key pieces, all seemingly healthy now for the Rams, for the Cowboys to stop. I think the Rams outscore the Cowboys very easily here.
I would agree with you. And if you don't know who the key playmaker is supposed to be, then the Cowboys defense may not know who the key playmaker is supposed to be. So that's number 1. Number 2, what did the Rams do so well last year that made them such an elite offense? It was play action. Jared Goff, fake it to Todd Gurley, fake it to C.J. Anderson, and then throw it to just about anybody and everybody. And it worked very, very well for that offense. Now they're starting to use it a good bit more. They're second in play action yards, I believe. And play action is directly correlated with winning football games, especially if you're the LA Rams. And so I think you're going to see that once again. I think this Cowboys defense will remain confused. And so I completely agree. I think the Rams win this football game, and now all of a sudden you have a little bit extra juice to play with.
What do you do with this over-under? Because if we both think that the Rams have all these offensive weapons, do the Cowboys score enough points on their own to make this thing go over the 48.5, or do the Rams shut down the Cowboys offense and win this one with both offense and defense?
I think the Rams defense can contain certain things. One thing I said in the last hour, I don't think Ezekiel Elliott is going to have a great game. I think in large part because the Rams will get out to an early lead, and it will force Dak Prescott to throw a good bit more. Now, he's capable of doing that, no doubt about it. But for Zeke to be a bigger part of this football game, it has to be close, or the Cowboys have to have a lead. And I'm not sure either of those things happen. I think the Rams jump out to an early lead for all the reasons that you and I talked about. And then Dak has to throw it a good bit more, which I think he's capable of doing. But overall, that means that the Cowboys score a lot of points, but they're late points. I still like the over total here.
Okay, good. I'm with you, too. Rams to the over in that one. Let's move to L.A., where the Chargers are going to be hosting the Minnesota Vikings. Vikings atop the NFC North, along with the Green Bay Packers. A very big game next week for those two teams because the Vikings and the Packers play each other on Monday night in Week 16. Could the Vikings get caught looking ahead to that game as they play on the road? They haven't been that good on the road, just 3-4 record away from home, undefeated at home. This, to me, is a sneaky spot for the Chargers to surprise the Vikings and win this game. It's a low spread anyways, 1.5, essentially a pick 'em, the money line, 110 versus the 104. I'm going to go ahead and take the 1.5 points and play the Chargers here. I think that their defense is going to be able, for the first time in a while, to really shut Minnesota down and confuse them a little bit. And Kirk Cousins is going to have a long day. That's my prediction.
I'll disagree. I think the Vikings are in a great spot here because, I understand that they may be looking ahead a little bit, but the margin for error is very, very small for Minnesota to win the division and get a really good playoff seed. And I think they understand that. I think they know that the stakes are very high for every single game down the stretch. Kirk Cousins has been at or near the top of the leaderboard in completion percentage over expected plus EPA per play, and that's even without Adam Thielen for some time now. He may be coming back, so that certainly helps this offense. The running game has been very effective for the Vikings. Dalvin Cook has been unbelievable. The offensive line has been unbelievable. And so they're incredibly whenever they want, whenever they want, against whomever they want. So I love the Vikings here.
You brought up Thielen. Maybe we'll talk to Dr. Chow about him in about less than 10 minutes. That's certainly a key player on the field if he happens to play for the Vikings today in L.A. Let's stay in California, but we're going to go to Northern California. Actually, 3 of the 4 California teams hosting today, including the Raiders. Jacksonville Jaguars coming into town. They've been spiraling, especially defensively, giving up tons of points. And not only are the Jacksonville Jaguars losing of late, Ed, but they're losing by 20, 17, 22, 35. I mean, they're just getting blown out. Can the Raiders blow them out today? They haven't been that great either. They're in a little bit of a personal tailspin themselves, but they are a home favorite here at -6.5, over under 46.5. What do we do here?
Tailspin, who has the greater tailspin, the greater free fall, all of those great cliches. I actually like Jacksonville to cover in this game. I don't think they're going to win outright because I still trust the Raiders and Derek Carr because Carr does have a high completion percentage. He's still able to move the football down the field, but this Raiders defense has really let this entire football team down. And that gives a great opportunity to Gardner Minshew to sort of establish his rhythm once again. Yeah, he doesn't have DJ Chark, but he does have Chris Conley. He does have Dede Westbrook. And I think Leonard Fournette could have a rather productive outing. And I think there are enough weapons for the Jaguars to at least keep up in a game like that.
I'm going to go ahead and say the Raiders win and win easily. Just from what I've seen from Jacksonville second half defense, they're literally just laying down and letting teams just blow them out late. I think with the Raiders having this their final game ever in Oakland before they go next year and move to Las Vegas, if they have the opportunity to blow out the Jags, they'll do that for their fans and give them a few extra touchdowns in the fourth quarter in the final game ever to be played in Oakland. So I'm going to go ahead and take the Raiders in this one and lay the 6.5 points. Let's stay in Northern California, but we're going to go to San Francisco where the Niners are hosting the Atlanta Falcons. The San Francisco 49ers are going to be a 10.5-point favorite here. Total 48.5. So a huge win for them to be able to beat New Orleans last week, go to New Orleans and win and stay above. Remember, they were a 5 seed, boom, right back into the top of the NFC now and looking for that home field bye throughout the playoffs, home field advantage and first week bye. We'll see if they can beat the Falcons now. Any sort of a letdown here after being as high as they were in New Orleans and then to come here and play the Falcons? That's the only reason you would think that the Falcons can cover if just San Francisco lets down.
If by letdown you mean going from 48 points to 31 points, then yes, the Niners will have a letdown. But I do think they can cover a rather large spread, in part because of George Kittle. That offense is a lot better with his presence. I think he will have the second best performance among all tight ends for the entire weekend. And Emmanuel Sanders has also been a great pickup. And it's made things a little bit tricky in terms of diagnosing the 49ers because I think the offense is significantly different with Sanders. Now Jimmy G has a deep threat he's comfortable with. He loves going to George Kittle. He seems to be wide open in a number of key plays. And so the offense is naturally a good bit more dynamic when they were already playing at a decent level at the start of the year. And yeah, the Falcons can score points, no doubt about it, but they're not scoring in bunches. They're not scoring a ton. So I would not be surprised if this is a high-scoring game and B, something where San Francisco doesn't quite recreate what they did last week, but they do just enough to come close. I think the Niners cover a large spread. Since we don't have Jim Sanas because he's partying down in Puerto Rico, I think, this weekend. Thanks for the invite, Jim. Who is your number one tight end? Because you mentioned you thought Kittle was number 2. Is it Kelsey? I think the weather might be a bit of a factor as far as Travis Kelce is concerned. I think he's going to be very high up there. He might be 3rd. I think my number one guy, though, would be Zach Ertz because I'm not sure who else Carson Wentz is going to throw to. I think it's more weighted opportunity that gives Zach Ertz the number one spot. But in terms of talent, ability, play calling, things like that, I put George Kittle in at number 2. All right. Thanks to our DFS expert, Eddie Gross. All right. We're going to take a quick break from you, Ed, and bring in Pro Football Doc, Dr. Chow, to talk about some injuries here that we are just discovering who may be playing and who may not be playing. Dr. Chow, the former doctor for the Chargers. I don't know if it was probably San Diego at that point, I'm guessing, Dr. Chow. But you can follow him on ProFootballDoc.com and on Twitter. His handle is ProFootballDoc. First of all, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Yes, definitely San Diego Chargers.
Back in the day. So let's talk about a guy that came up earlier in the show, and that is Adam Thielen. We have not seen him on the field in a long time now. Stephon Diggs has kind of had to carry that load. Are we going to finally today be able to have Thielen and Diggs back together? And if so, you know, what should we expect out of him for performance-wise?
Well, I do think Thielen is going to play today against the Los Angeles Chargers, but I don't know that they're going to play him the usual number of reps and be the go-to guy. You have to remember they play the Packers next week and then the Bears the following week. And in addition to that, Thielen has had 2 setbacks coming back from this hamstring already. The last thing they want is a third. So I do think he plays, but I don't think he's on the field for 50-plus plays, etc.
Okay, so maybe fantasy-wise, don't key on him too much, but see what we do this week for next week when they take on the Packers. Maybe a tune-up game for him. Let's talk about the Raiders real quick, Dr. Chow. Josh Jacobs, is he going to go? And if so, could he have a huge game? Because that Jacksonville defense has been letting up some big yards to running backs.
Yeah, I think Josh Jacobs will be good to go. I think it's less of a surprise that he's going to be good to go today than a surprise that he wasn't good to go last week. Remember, this was a Week 7 scapula, shoulder blade, shoulder plate injury, and he played 5 games before missing last week. So he must have had some sort of minor setback, but I would expect he should be good to go today.
All right, let's talk about one other running back and one that has not seen the field in weeks now, but is expected to be back for the Pittsburgh Steelers, James Conner. What can you tell us?
Yeah, I think he is back after his AC joint sprain, and you're right about the splitting carries is probably what's likely because he's missed so much time. He did have that one temporary comeback against Cleveland before re-aggravating his shoulder.
All right, I always like to talk about individuals, but also as a team on a whole. Let's talk about one game where you can tell us about the injury index and which team is healthier than the others. Let's go with the Tennessee Titans and hosting the Houston Texans. Who's the healthier team here?
Well, they're both, it's week 15, right? And everybody's a little bit banged up, but they're both functional offensively and defensively. The two key injuries here are going to be 2 hamstrings, Derrick Henry's hamstring and Will Fuller's hamstring. Will Fuller's going to go, and he's going to probably run a lot of go routes, which is what's in his repertoire, as opposed to more stopping and cutting. So he'll be able to stretch the field some. And Derrick Henry has shown to have an ability to play through his hamstring, where he was in and out last week. So look for those to both go, and it's really the magnitude of the game. No one's sitting this one out because this is for the division and for the playoff spot, since they're both tied atop of the AFC South.
All right, as always, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Chow. And I'm loving the swag you got going on there, the Pro Football Doc logo and everything. I'd have to find me one of those somehow.
Well, we'll send you one. Give me your address.
Merry Christmas to me. All right, thanks. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks.
All right. Just got myself a free sweater. Yeah, Dr. Chow. You can follow him at profootballdoc.com. I have an account there. Sign up for an account. You get all the information. And you can also follow his tweets on Twitter. He is at profootballdoc. I think he's closing in on about 200,000 followers for good reason. He has fantastic info. If you'd like to take that info that he just gave us and apply it to making a winning bet, sign up for a free FanDuel Sportsbook account using the promo code MOREWAYS25. You can get a risk-free bet up to $500 insight credit, and on top of that, a free $25 bet to use however you want to use it on these Week 15 NFL games. Still a few more games to talk about here on More Ways to Win. So when we come back, we'll be talking the late game, Steelers and Bills. We still need to talk about the Monday night game as well between the Indianapolis Colts and the New Orleans Saints. You're watching More Ways to Win. Stay right there. We'll be back with one more segment after this.
For us handicappers, there's only ever been one way to play. Sure, I can bet my horse, but I can't lock my odds. But there is another way. Betfair has changed the game with more ways to win. With Betfair, I can lock my odds, and I can bet during the race. You've got to try this out. Smart is the new lucky. Claim your $200 welcome bonus. Bet now at betfair.com.
More ways, fans, you need to know about the new and improved Watch TVG app, where you can stay connected to key betting info and watch all our great TVG racing. It's available on Apple TV, Roku, and Amazon Fire and Fire Stick. TVG account holders simply go to your connected device and download the app. Folks interested in sports betting can access the FanDuel odds feed that shows betting lines from all the major pro and college sports. Racing fans can see every TVG and TVG2 race on separate channels, or a third racing option, the TVG Racebook, that displays both networks on top of 3 track feeds. Another option, Racing Now, allows you to watch select tracks full screen. Finally, we have TVG's content marketplace where you can see races and interviews and stories you missed along the way with more ways to win clips and handicapping segments. Everything you need in one place, the Watch TVG app. Download it today.
They say less is more, but we believe more is more. That's why we built FanDuel Sportsbook with more ways to bet, more ways to fund your account, more ways to cash in, and more ways to cash out, with payouts delivered straight to your bank account in as little as 48 hours. You want more? You got it. Join today and get a risk-free bet worth up to $500. FanDuel Sportsbook. More ways to win.
Welcome back to FanDuel's More Ways to Win. I'm Dave Weaver, talking Week 15 games, and let's go ahead and talk about the late game tonight, where at Heinz Field, the Pittsburgh Steelers are telling the Buffalo Bills, bring it on. The Steelers have been red hot, winning 7 out of 8, mostly with their defense, holding teams to, 10 to 20 points, somewhere in that range. Can they shut down Josh Allen and the Bills tonight, Ed? That is the question. The Steelers, a 1.5-point favorite, minus 112 in the money line. The total here has gone from 36.5 up now to 37.5. Who do you like in this one?
It is amazing that 36.5 could be a total in the National Football League, but given how these defenses are playing, I understand it. Still taking the over there. But as far as this game is concerned, I think Devlin Hodges is the better quarterback than Josh Allen. He's also at home. He also gets Juju Smith-Schuster back. And Hodges has used James Washington more effectively than any quarterback before him. And to me, that's key because Washington is the number 2 threat for this passing attack. He does need to be part of this offense for them to be effective. And he finally is. And I think that combination is better than what the Bills have and John Brown and Cole Beasley. 2 solid receivers, but I like the collective with the Steelers a good bit more. I like Devlin Hodges more at the quarterback position than Josh Allen. And so I think the Steelers win this game and cover.
Both Juju and James Conner were expecting to come back this week, but Juju's not going to be able to suit up. But Conner is, but you still have Washington. You still have Johnson. It's been a while, I think, since Vance McDonald stepped up and had a big game. Perhaps, he's due to do that. Cole Beasley's been good. You can't dispute that the last span of a month, he's been really a go-to guy. It was all John Brown. And I think Cole Beasley has given Josh Allen at least another bit of an option. He's made some big plays for them. This is a tricky game for me because the Steelers, I don't know, have they been winning with smoke and mirrors? Are they as good as their record indicates? Bills the same. I think the Bills are, a 9-4 team that isn't that great. It's just like the 2 teams that fit the same mold. That are both kind of overrated per se. I like the under. I don't think there's going to be. I take that back. I could see it. I'm skipping this game, Ed, because I think earlier in the week I was leaning that the under was so low that we're going to get the over home, and now I could see this being a 10-10 game going into overtime. As a Steeler fan, I'm going to just watch this one and save my wagers for other games. How's that?
20-17 would make things very interesting for a game like this. And
yeah,
all of a sudden the hook matters, and I wouldn't be surprised if something like that happens. One thing, too, I want to add, Devlin Hodges, I do think he's a good quarterback. I think the Steelers are legitimately a good football team with him. Total QBR, 14th in football last week, 22nd the week before that. Yeah, not a lot of yards, but he's very efficient. And I think they're going to trouble him. So that's why I like the Steelers here.
17-17 going in overtime would be a perfect one, because even if you have the over, you could still get that first touchdown in overtime that puts it at 40. Both sides can get there with the field goal. So we'll see. That should be a close game in Pittsburgh. Maybe not such a close game in New Orleans on Monday night, where the Saints are going to play host to the Indianapolis Colts. Saints haven't been that good on Monday night. 1-5 against the spread their last 6 Monday night games. The Colts have been good on Monday night. And the Colts are getting 9.5 points in this one. 11 out of the 13 games this year for Indianapolis have been decided by a touchdown or less. So for them to be getting 9.5, that's enough for me to take them and the points. Saints really don't blow teams out all that often. They're perfectly fine, I think, getting a win here by 3 or 6 or 7. I'm going to take the Colts. What about you?
In the high-profile games, that's exactly what happens with the Saints, that they sort of eke one out in some way. Yeah, they didn't against the 49ers last week, but had they not left so much time for Jimmy Garoppolo and George Kittle, then things would have been very different, and then they eke out another one. So I understand that in terms of sort of highlight bias, but overall, the Colts, they're struggling because they have just a bevy of injuries, and I don't know how you recover when it keeps happening to them week after week after week. T.Y. Hilton's status is especially important. Yeah, you might have the occasional playmaker that at least keeps the Colts competitive, but eventually the patchwork catches up to them. And yeah, it's a good rushing attack with the Colts, but the passing attack isn't that great. And even though I like Jacoby Brissett a lot, he just doesn't have the weapons that he needs for this passing offense to really go. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Saints jump out to an early lead. It takes the Colts out of the comfort zone of running the football a good bit. And then you might see a pick or two or a fumble or two, something like that, maybe even some 3 and outs. So I think the conditions are ripe for the Saints to get a blowout win, and I think they will.
It's one of the bigger money lines of the week at minus 390. The Niners are the highest at minus 500. All right, we're going to move on and start talking about a few prop bets here, Ed. And we'll go back to the Tennessee-Houston game. And we talked about some in the first hour, but we're going to dive into a few that we didn't mention. And that is Deshaun Watson on the Texans. Will he or won't he throw an interception? Yes, he will, or no, he won't.
I'm going to go with yes, because I do think this is going to be a shootout where you're going to throw the football a good bit more. And look, Houston's rushing attack is pretty good. They do have that two-headed monster in the backfield. So, and of course, Watson is very mobile, and there will be quarterback design runs, I assume, in a game like this. So at the same time, when you have a shootout game, you do have to throw a good bit more because you do have to keep up with the pace. And I think that's when the mistakes are bound to happen. And this Titans defense can capitalize off of something like that. So I'm going to go with yes.
And let's talk about DeAndre Hopkins as far as catching the ball. 86.5 yards, receiving yards for him. Will he get it?
He may be the best receiver in football, and especially if this is going to be a shootout, he's going to get the ball. He's going to get at least a few catches, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're for some chunk plays, and so I'm going to take the over.
All right, you've been following Ryan Tannehill pretty closely over this run the last 6 or 7 weeks. Is he getting these points by throwing the ball, by handing it off? I mean, can we expect him to throw for 256.5 yards in this game?
Absolutely we can, and especially if Derrick Henry isn't 100% and they decide to throw the ball a good bit more because they don't want to subject their running back to additional injury, then that would be more reason for Ryan Tannehill to get to this number. But also, too, he has a number of playmakers, and it almost doesn't seem to matter who they are because they have been injured here and there, but the offense still works, and it's still functional. I'm going to take the over.
What is Houston's strength on defense? Is it being able to stop the run, or are they not a very good defensive team on the ground? Because Derrick Henry's total here, as far as his rushing yards, 95.5. Do you think he can get that?
Even if Houston could boast a great rushing defense, I think Derrick Henry would be able to run over just about anybody and everybody because he is a bowling ball. He is tough to take down. He runs through defenders, not around them. And with the frame he has, that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And we also see him rip off some rather large runs basically throughout his career. So I expect at least a few of those in a game like this. I'm taking the over.
All right, we can't end the show without talking about a Eli Manning prop because maybe it's the last one that we ever have on him, or at least at MetLife. He'll make a start against the Dolphins. Passing yards for Eli, 256.5.
I'm going to take the under here. And it's not that Eli Manning has played poorly, at least at the start of the year, but you look at that game last week and, okay, good first half. Darius Slayton certainly helped him out a good bit. But he just doesn't have the receivers he needs to get to a mark like this. And plus, I think the Giants will use Saquon Barkley a good bit more, take the ball out of Eli Manning's hands. And the weather may be a bit of a factor out at MetLife, maybe not snowing, but it may be a little windy out there. So that may be even more reason to run the football a good bit more. So I'm going to say up.
All right, best bet time. We got about a minute left, Ed. You can give me one play that you would make today. It could be a parlay. It could just be one game. What would be the one thing that you're betting on today if you could only bet one?
I love the Buccaneers alternate spread. I could see a blowout in Detroit, and so I think I might move that spread to something like 13.5 and get a 2-touchdown advantage for Jameis Winston and company.
All right, I'm going to play a two-team parlay. The Rams laying actually they're getting a point now, I guess. The Rams and then the over in the Tennessee-Houston game. Parlay those two. Ed, we'll talk to you next week. Thanks. Enjoy the games.
Thank you so much.
All right, if you'd like to get down on this action, you can do so by signing up for a free FanDuel Sportsbook account and downloading the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Enter that promo code MOREWAYS25. You get a free $25 bet, and you'll get a risk-free bet up to $500. Best of luck. Best of luck at however you play these games, whether it be today or even tomorrow night's game between the Colts and the Saints. Enjoy Week 15. We'll see you next week.